And a good day, everyone. Welcome into the It's Official podcast. He's Jeff Siegel. I'm Jeremy Plonk. The California Crown inaugural edition now in the rearview mirror. We turn our attention to Keeneland this week, where opening day is Friday, and two major Breeders' Cup prep weekends still to come in New York and on the West Coast at Santa Anita as well. Jeff, we're really in that prime time right now where things are just crossing over, and they all point towards the Breeders' Cup coming up the 1st and 2nd of November.
Great racing last week, although I was disappointed that the New York races were contested over wet surfaces. You can't really get a true line there. Mm-hmm. You just have to kind of assume that whatever they did, they can do on fast ground, which is usually a bad assumption. Mm-hmm. But this week at Keeneland, they are loaded with racing. I know that's your main track that you do, and no one, as far as I'm concerned, does a better job than you at Keeneland. So I will be watching and listening to you. But in the meantime, out here in California, we still have good racing and things are starting to take shape, and it's not too long. We've got one major week of racing left before the Breeders' Cup. So after that, we'll pretty much be set, and looking forward to everybody coming out here healthy.
Record handle day for California Crown for a fall meet at Santa Anita. So good news there on the wagering front. Seems like people on track had a good time as well. Off the track and with the bettors, that's where we're going to focus our attention now and recap some of those big races from Santa Anita the past week and how they may impact the various divisions across the Breeders' Cup and the other races that we saw coast to coast. Let's go to the big board this week. Our first of 5 topics: Breeders' Cup Classic Fallout. We talked about the $1 million California Crown, its inaugural edition. National Treasure was trying to stretch his gas. We saw him win already this year in the Met Mile. We saw him win in a mile and an eighth in the Pegasus World Cup. He got his rematch with Senor Buscador, but it was neither of the two getting the nose on the wire. Let's go back to the replay with Frank Miramati.
And National Treasure past the 5/8 pole, in charge, a length and a half to Katona in second. Muth Red Cap 3 deep in third. At the rails, Subsanador with Newgate just behind him, still 4 lengths off the lead with less than a half mile to travel in the California Crown. Senor Buscador is now 8 lengths off the pace, which has been set by National Treasure. National Treasure every step of the way to Katona. Muth on the outside gets his cue. At the rails, Subsanador still 4. Not much change in the running order since the gate opened. National Treasure carving out all the fractions. Still well within himself at the top of the stretch. And he turns for home with a 2-length lead. Subsanador comes out to chase him home. And in the center of the track, Newgate is bearing down in third. Here comes Newgate with big strides after National Treasure. National Treasure, Subsanador, and Newgate. 3 of them line up in an absolute thriller. Subsanador in between horses. Here's the line. Subsanador and Mike Smith to win the California Crown Stakes.
It was a reminiscent finish of the Kentucky Derby this year with 3 noses on the wire in a big money race. Jeff, what do you make of it in postscript? Let's go through the different horses. Where do you want to start?
Well, Subsanador is obviously acclimating well. He was a very good horse in Argentina. He was beaten ahead in the big cap, which I didn't think was a major race. I mean, it was a major race, not a great race. Mm-hmm. Badly in the Gold Cup after that. And then went to Monmouth and won a nice race there with a triple-digit buyer number, which he came very close to duplicating in this race. Mm-hmm. But he didn't really have to do that much. I mean, he was sitting right behind the leaders, very soft pace, saved ground every step of the way, angled out. And if he had, blown by the leader and draw off, I would have been a lot more impressed than his life and death win, with basically Newgate taking the worst of it from the outside. Mm-hmm. The one disappointment, really more than anything else, though, for me was that National Treasure couldn't win given the pristine trip that he had over a track that was very kind and has been for a long time to front runners or at least pace pressers. He got an easy lead. It was a 35-1 shot sitting outside of him. That was it. He didn't really get engaged to the top of the stretch. He battled back, but given that kind of trip, he's supposed to battle back, right? And still couldn't seal the deal. I don't know. To me, the Baffert horses were so up and down, or have been now recently in several weeks now, that I'm not sure I trust any of them. And I'm not sure what Bob's going to do with National Treasure, although I would assume that he'll run him back in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Yeah. But the rest of these horses, when I look at the Breeders' Cup Classic projected field, I mean, they look like they're second level type of horses. But the race is not going to be as deep as I thought it was going to be. So I would give Subsanador a chance to produce another forward move, maybe not a major forward move, but I think he'll lay his body down and run well.
Right.
Newgate ran better than I thought he would, and National Treasure is going to have to back up to a mile. I don't know what the heck happened to Muth. I mean, he was in a great spot on the outside and just waved the white flag and wound up last. I didn't like Senor Buscador going in because his style does not, and never will work on this kind of track in a race that doesn't have a lot of pace. Now, he shouldn't have been beaten 15 lengths, but he had little chance going in. And again, I'm not sure where he's at either. And keep in mind that the Del Mar racetrack, which used to favor closers this summer, very pro speed, similar to Santa Anita. So I don't know what kind of future he has in California. Senor Buscador, disappointing, and I'm not looking for him to rebound in any way.
All right, so mixed reviews coming out of the California Crown as towards the Classic or the Dirt Mile, depending which divisions they want to go. I agree with you. I think National Treasure should head back to the Dirt Mile where there's no Cody's Wish this year. And he just looked like that was gift wrap to the 1 1/8, and he still couldn't deliver. Right. Yeah. So I can't imagine him at a 1 1/4 against tougher competition for the Classic. Also in the Classic division, as we try to shake things out, it was a wet track in the Woodward. Skippy Longstocking looked like he'd be lone speed and capable of getting a 1 1/8 there. His 1 1/8 successes in the past were primarily at Charlestown, around 3 turns with a very short, like 550-foot stretch at Charlestown. He found the stretch not to his liking at Aqueduct when he was clearly ready to go home for the victory in the Woodward, but then he hit the wall. Tap it Trice with the win.
Masquerade, who's not done yet as they reach the top of the stretch. 1:11.4 for 3/4 of a mile, and Skippy Longstocking is trying to win it right here. It's Skippy Longstocking, who now straightens up, has a final furlong to get. Skippy Longstocking is now drawing away. Tap it Trice is ranging up on the outside, gets some clear running room, has every shot to run this leader down. Skippy Longstocking is now weary here in the late stages. Tap it Trice is lunging. Tap it Trice gets up and wins it. Tap it Trice wins the Woodward over Skippy Longstocking, Crouppy, and Masquerade in 1 minute 50 seconds flat.
We can say that the winner was gaining ground and making it up, Tap it Trice, but the stride on Skippy Longstocking was absolutely finished over the last 100 yards in there, barely going up and down at all. This is a race that simply, I think, came to Tap it Trice. Field of 4, nobody really handled the mud amongst the other 2 in there. It was just a case where the winner came back to him, to me.
Yeah, I mean, if you ever want to have a visual of the term hitting a wall, that was Skippy Longstocking in the final 16th of a mile. Tap it Trice, who had been soundly beaten, beaten 7 lengths with no excuse at all in the Jockey Club Gold Cup over a Fast Crown at Saratoga earlier this month, or now it's last month. But Tap it Trice, he obviously has a history of running well on off track. But again, as you pointed out, it looked like Skippy Longstocking lost more than Tap it Trice won. And again, here you have a situation where very one-pace type of horse is Tap it Trice. He has to lay fairly close because he doesn't have any great kick. He just grinds away. And if he's going to come out to California to run at Del Mar in the Breeders' Cup Classic, which is the plan, and it should be, I just don't see him having the acceleration to be able to act at Del Mar's track, which is a quick surface and relatively short stretch over a track that's kind of speed. He is really going to be up against it. Skippy Longstocking probably would be best suited if they backed him up to a mile. He could probably hit the board in a race like that. And again, the other 2 horses, Crouppy didn't handle the course, and the other horse was overmatched. So I don't think we can take much out of this. It's a nice race to win. It'll look good in the catalog and the resume, but not a great edition of the Woodward. And I'm not looking for this race, the 4 that were in it, to have any kind of real serious impact at Del Mar and the Breeders' Cup Classic.
No, I think really between the California Crown and the Woodward, we got more answers for the Dirt Mile than anything, right?
Yes.
National Treasure belongs back there. He was 2nd in the race last year. Skippy Longstocking belongs back there. He was 3rd in the race last year in the Dirt Mile. They look like they're on a collision course to meet in the Dirt Mile again, see who else might be in that field. But I don't think we got a whole lot of classic feel out of this Woodward at all. I mean, Tap it Trice will probably get a chance to compete in the Breeders' Cup Classic now, obviously. And he's run enough decent recent races over his career that he belongs in the field, but he's an outsider for sure in the Breeders' Cup Classic. And the same with Subsanador and Newgate. They both look like horses that are kind of, double-digit odds and up when we talk about potential in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So more news in the Classic division as we stay on our first topic. These are some off-track and on-track news. Dornoch has been retired, the winner of the Belmont Stakes this year, and also the Haskell Invitational, coming off the loss in the Travers Last Out. Retired. Trainer Danny Garkin said in the racing press this week. Jeff, bone bruising, something that ended the career of Smarty Jones and many horses that people have heard over the years. Thankfully, nothing of major seriousness in terms of an injury. If we're getting the straight story, we always have to preface it with that. But from what we know, Dornoch will retire as a horse who can go on to a breeding career. And what's the takeaway of what we saw from this horse on the racetrack?
Well, he's a nice horse. He's going to look, again, another horse when they promote him as a stallion is going to look really good on paper. So he'll get mares for sure. Mm-hmm. But when he got beaten his last race in the Travers, they probably felt, well, he ran below form and maybe he's not as good as he used to be or is. But problem is the horses that beat him in that race, Fierceness et al., they actually left him behind. In other words, he ran his race, his normal, okay, decent, good race, But they brought their A game to a different level, and he was unable to cope with it. And unless he was going to be 100% for the Classic, I would have, if I owned him, would have been afraid of running him and exposing him. One race anybody can excuse, but if you get dusted 2 in a row, it's not the kind of momentum you want to have going into a stud career. It might be better off if he just packed it up. You know what I'm saying? Regardless of the injury. Now, I'm sure the injury is real. I'm not saying it isn't, but this might actually work out well in the long run for him. So he was. We lost. A course that would have gotten some play, but this might be the best thing that happens to them because I think in retrospect, you look at Fierceness. You may not be able to trust him, but when he decides to run, he's better than Dornoch.
And Dornoch's 2 Grade 1 wins, plus the Fountain of Youth early in the year. Don't want to forget about that one. We'll get him on the ballot for champion 3-year-old. He'll be one of the finalists, I'm sure. But he didn't get a chance to make any kind of closing argument to win a championship. So he's probably out of the talk for the 3-year-old title. Now, one 3-year-old who's looking to make some news coming up in less than 24 hours time. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Eastern in the U.S., it'll be later in the day in Japan. We're going to see Forever Young's first race since the Kentucky Derby. Of course, Forever Young, the horse who was leaned on the entire length of the stretch and then pushed on by Tyler Gaffleone, Sierra Leone, and Tyler Gaffleone putting a number on Forever Young in the stretch run of the Kentucky Derby when he came up 2 noses short. He is back in action in a race called the Japan Dirt Classic. It's going to be run outside Tokyo City. Post time just after 7. It's a 1.25-mile dirt race. Ramjet's in there, a horse who won the Hyacinth Stakes earlier this year and was on the road to the Kentucky Derby, also a recent winner in Japan. So it'll be a decent test for him over 1.25 miles. Jeff, Forever Young, if he can get a big victory coming up in 12 hours time or so, what do we think of him as a Classic prospect?
Major contender, I think. I mean, by all rights, he should be undefeated, Jeremy. He should have won the Kentucky Derby. You can go back and look at that race, and if that horse hadn't been leaning on him on the outside, he'd have won. He would have won. And he didn't get a great trip before that either.
Right.
So, to me, whatever we thought of him, and, you looked at his races overseas and not only in Japan, but overseas, I think he's a top-class racehorse, regardless of the fact that he's coming out of places where you don't normally evaluate the races as being that strong. He is a very, very good horse. This was always the plan. It wasn't like he got hurt or anything since then. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing his prep race because if he performs up to standard, he is going to be a major player at Santa Anita. He doesn't have to be that far back. I'm sorry, Del Mar. He doesn't have to be that far back, and he's got a style that can adjust to pace. I'm hopeful. I really want him to run and win because that would be great theater for the Classic. You got true world Classic, the best from the Far East, the best from the States, and then the best from Europe. I mean, wouldn't that be nice? So
Yeah.
I think he'll win, and I think he's going to be extremely dangerous.
The odds there from oddschecker.com, grabbed just before we recorded our podcast here on Tuesday afternoon in the Eastern U.S. So 7-1, the price right now being offered on Forever Young could change with a big performance tomorrow morning in the Japan Dirt Classic. If you want to watch that, go to expressbet.com and look for Tokyo City on the drop-down menu for the racetracks. It'll be race number 11 again, post 7 o'clock, just after 7 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday morning here, East Coast time. So be sure to check that out. Let's go to our second topic this week on It's Official. We turn our attention from the Classic division to the mile on turf. And just how good is Johannes? That's the question Jeff has posed. Frank Miramati is going to tell you how good he was on Saturday getting up in the City of Hope mile.
Conclude keeps going, 2-length lead, but here's Johannes, and Johannes looms between horses. He's had a great trip, and he's poised to pounce at the top of the stretch. Johannes up to take the lead. De Jour has surfaced with his rally, and Trickery is in fourth, a 16th to go, and Johannes puts away Conclude and opens up another dazzling display for Johannes to win the City of Hope mile.
22.84 over the final quarter or mile. That's the way you want to see a turf miler, pick him up and lay him down. Tim Yaktian's got himself the top turfer in the U.S. right now, going short or long, I think. Maybe Cogburn in the sprint ranks would make an argument, but Johannes, Jeff, just absolutely on his game again. Frivolous foul claim in there disallowed. So we had to hold our celebratory, congratulations in that one until the stewards made the final ruling, but no doubt about who was best.
No, he's a very, very good horse. Obviously, if you look at his form, he's now 6 for 6 at Santa Anita. But trust me when I tell you, he's just as good as Del Mar. It ain't gonna matter, He's literally, I think, run out of competition in the States. And if he is not going to win the Breeders' Cup Breeders' Cup mile on turf, it's going to have to be somebody from Europe, Jeremy. I mean, there's nobody in the States that can touch him. These California turf miles they're just very average as far as I'm concerned. Usually you have one or two that stick out and they have a kind of a rivalry, but there is no rivalry here. I'm not so sure the New York turf milers are that great either, but you always have to worry about who they send over from Europe. And I don't know who's coming yet. But if they send anything close to their best, then you'll have some competition. Otherwise, Johannes, the thing about him is he never gets into trouble because he's got such great tactical speed. He breaks like a rocket ship. He puts himself in this position. He switches off beautifully. He gives you that instant on a dime acceleration that you ask for in the short stretch. He sprints home. He is just, and his numbers are very solid. They're not like off the moon, but he only does what he needs to do. And here's one other thing. He had not run since July 8th, Johannes. And so I don't think Tim did a whole lot with him in the interim. I mean, I'm not saying he was short or anything, but I don't think he was totally cranked up for this race. He didn't really want a hard race. He wanted to, he thought he needed a race. He didn't want to really train him hard. And I watched him train in the morning, and he was kind of fooling around a little bit. It wasn't really that serious. But I think between this race should set him up beautifully for the next one. So I think you're going to see an even better version of Johannes the first Saturday in November.
We look at the Europeans and we just assume they're better at turf miles, but the Americans have really held their own. I know the Europeans have won the Breeders' Cup mile the last 4 years in a row, but over the last 12 years, it's 6-6. U.S. has split with the Europeans. And there was a time, I know since 2004, since we've seen a California-based turfer win the mile. That was Singletary, who went down to Lone Star and won. But there was a period there between 1999 and 2004 where Julio Canani was on a run. You had the Val Royales, horses like that, Singletary. The Californians won the mile 4 times in that 6-year period. So when they're good, they can be good enough to win on this kind of stage. And maybe Johannes is one of those every 20-year kind of horses. It's been 20 years since a West Coast turfer's been good enough to win the mile when Singletary did it. But, you look around the world and you say, well, who's going to come in? Right now on oddschecker.com, the favorite right now at 7-2 is Notable Speech for Charlie Appleby, a 3-year-old, a horse who was a winner of the 2000 Guineas and the Sussex Stakes, and the 3-year-old filly Porta Fortuna. You might remember her running here last year in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies turf. She's won 3 Group 1s in a row. She's expected maybe to come over. So again, 3-year-olds against the older horses. We talked about it a lot in the Classic division and in some other divisions, but the experience, the maturity of, and the home field advantage that we have with Johannes, maybe it's enough to beat what's probably going to be 3-year-olds from overseas that have the strongest hands.
Well, and again, I mean, I'm not sure who's coming, and I have done enough research on the top Euros that for this year's form to really evaluate them yet. I'll obviously do that in due time. But you see the kind of trip, if you look at his form, you see the kind of trip that he always gets. He's always within range. He doesn't make any mistakes. He doesn't beat himself. He never have to worry about the pace. So fast, slow, it doesn't matter. So even from, if he, have an outside post, he gets over and he gets in his spot. So those horses that I mentioned, or you mentioned, are good, obviously. But I don't know about beating Johannes down on his home court here. And that's why, I just think he's the logical top pick and logical favorite, regardless of who they sent over. But I do know one thing: they better send somebody over pretty good, because the locals, the other Americans, they have very little chance to beat Johannes if Johannes shows up with anything close to his A game, and he always shows up with his A game.
Not much left in New York to talk about in terms of the Breeders' Cup Mile. The West Coast, we already know. We just saw that ticket punch last weekend. There are a couple races in Kentucky, though, coming up this weekend. Let's take a look at potential Turf Mile division impacts coming up at Keeneland. These graphics courtesy of Keeneland here for the Coolmore Turf Mile coming up on Saturday. Mountain Bear, a horse who was second in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf last year for Aidan O'Brien, back stateside. This race did not come up particularly deep. I mean, we've seen some heavy hammers in this race over the years. Carl Spackler, the likely favorite off his win at Saratoga in this particular spot, Jeff. Not the deepest field. So if you're looking at who's going to step up and take on Johannes, there's not a large fear factor out of this group coming from Keeneland.
No, Mountain Bear's good. Obviously, Carl Spackler on his best day is good. But the rest of these look like, I don't know, California horses in the division. So I'd like to see both of those horses. I mean, you want competition in any race. Nobody wants to see a Breeders' Cup race from a wagering standpoint with a 3 to 5 shot. And I don't think Johannes will be that short. For some reason, he never gets hammered. He was 4 to 5 last week. I was thinking, how does he lose and he's 4 to 5? I mean, I've seen a lot, 4 to 5 shots in my life that had a lot less chance of winning than Johannes did.
Yeah.
So it'll shake out. But it's good to have a local star that we can root for anyway. And Johannes is it. And of course, close to the barn with Tim and Millie, who I work with. So that's always fun.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I keep forgetting this colt is by Nyquist. And I'm thinking, I watched him train on the dirt. He trains well on the dirt, but you're not going to mess up a good thing doing any experimentation now. Maybe next year you might get bold, but right now he's as good as there is.
Yeah, I was all set to text Millie and tell her, way to go, congrats, everything like that. And all of a sudden the numbers started blinking. I'm like, you gotta wait to send that text. You do not congratulate before they go official. So didn't want to jinx that one though. But congrats to all around there. How good is Johannes? Jeff thinks maybe good enough to win the Breeders' Cup Mile on the grass. So looking forward to seeing him in a couple weeks' time. Let's talk now in the filly and mare sprint division for the Breeders' Cup. A filly who was stating her case, and it was a mighty good one this past week. We know Sharp Azteca on the West Coast is probably going to be the favorite for the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint, but did we find the second choice over the weekend in the Gallant Bloom Stakes? Just maybe so. Let's take a look back here with Chris Griffin on the mic.
Nick Style is very game towards the inside, but now Ways and Means is trying to assert, and Ways and Means gets the cue and kicks for home. Ways and Means is extending the margin now. Nick Style is very resilient towards the inside the final furlong. Ways and Means approaches the final 16th, and this is going to be an easy victory here. Ways and Means wins the Grade 2 Gallant Bloom. Nick Style second, then the New York bred Sterling Silver finished third in 1 minute 15.46 seconds.
Chad Brown, of course, Goodnight Olive through this division over the past several years. Now, Ways and Means could be his heavy hammer to swing in this division against the West Coaster, Sweet Azteca. Jeff, what do you make of this one? Or Sharp Azteca, I should say.
Really good, Philly. As much as I love Sweet Azteca, again, it's another situation where she has been really beating moderate horses. And in every race she runs out here, including the race that she beat Adair Manor in, which was a mile, she's been gifted some very soft front running trips. She's very quick out of the gate, and she's going to be in front, I would assume, in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. But instead of having some no chance for sitting second or third, she's going to have Ways and Means stalking her. And that's a whole different ball game, I'm telling you. Yeah. I mean, she took Nick's Style by the throat and just chewed her up, spit her out. And that is a very fast horse in Nick's Style, undefeated filly up until into this race. So, I mean, you know, the fact that it was off track doesn't worry me because she's done it on fast ground. And
right.
She was the best 2-year-old filly I saw last year up until around, you know, August or so. And then she didn't follow through. But, boy, she is back to where I thought she was going to be all along. And going 7 furlongs, she's got that great style where she has enough speed to be right up there. She switches off, and then she, just like Sweet Azteca, this is going to be a great race. Now, again, I give Sweet Azteca the edge because I know she likes Del Mar, and she's a little bit, probably a little quicker than Ways and Means early, but she is going to have to really prove her mettle because that's going to be a filly breathing down her neck that I don't think she's seen yet. Don't forget, when she beat Adair Manor, she got loose on the lead that day. It was a good race, obviously, but here's Ways and Means. She ain't going to be giving up. So I look forward very much to a duel in that race. That's going to be a great race for the Mare Sprint.
You mentioned Adair Manor, and I don't know if it's come up since we've been on the air. I know it's been in the recent days, but she has been retired and is now out of the Breeders' Cup Distaff, so we will not see her. As far as this filly and mare sprint division goes, there is also the Thoroughbred Club of America Stakes coming up Saturday at Keeneland. Clearly unhinged, a former West Coast horse who's been with Steve Asmussen for the last several starts in the Midwest and East. Bright Work, the good-looking 2-year-old last year who came back and got a win earlier this summer at Saratoga, and her only start this year for John Ortiz. Probably the headliners in what is a historically weak edition of the Thoroughbred Club of America. This race has had a major impact on the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint over the decades, but this year's race does not look quite up to the strength of some of the others. Jeff, let's keep it right here with the sprinters because there's a couple horses short and intermediate distance that don't fit in the Filly and Mare Sprint division, but a couple of the other divisions that we want to mention from this past weekend. One of those was Straight No Chaser. On Sunday in the Santa Anita Sprint Championship, he ran off and hid, and he's going to be one of the horses to watch in this year's Breeders' Cup Sprint.
He actually broke his maiden on grass, but he's just as effective, if not more so, on dirt. Very fast horse. If you remember his race, I believe it was Preakness of last year, the same day. He won a race with a 107 buyer number, the Maryland Sprint. He won by more than 7. He looked like, you know, a second coming of Dr. Fager, and then he got hurt, and that was the end of him for the rest of the year. He came back in a race called the Run Happy. He was supposed to win that race, stumbled badly at the start, lost all chance. That was back in May, so now he's off another 3 months. But he came back last Saturday and won very nicely. And if he can just hold together for one more race, he is a fast son of a gun for trainer Dan Blacker. So he was very impressive out here in California. I think he is a major contender in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. And there's another horse that ran back east. That was at Belmont, the Big A, and the Vosburg. And you know, you and I liked the horse in that race named Scotland, and I was very happy with Scotland's performance, but he was no match for this Chilean horse named Mufasa, who was visually really impressive as well, and he's going to go in the mile, so the dirt mile. So we saw a couple of other horses that we haven't really talked about yet that should be talked about as Breeders' Cup contenders.
Mufasa, want to keep an eye on there for Nacho Correas. So that's a look at the horses in the short and intermediate divisions for the Breeders' Cup. Let's go to our fourth topic on the board this week. How about the colts and geldings on the turf going along? The U.S. Turf Division, we really haven't had solid year. I'll be kind in that division this year of any kind of standout type performances. The veteran mare Warlike Goddess was going for her third straight crossover victory against the boys in the Joe Hurst Turf Classic. She ran a race over the bog, but it wasn't quite good enough. Maybe we have a horse who's finally decided he wants to be the head of the division. We'll talk about Far Bridge after getting a look at his race.
Sights as they reach the top of the lane. It is now Silver Knot in the Godolphin Blue who kicks for home. Warlike Goddess with every shot to run this rival down, and here she comes. Far Bridge is diving down towards the inside, has run as well. 3 across the course. It is now Far Bridge who's trying to pull the upset over Warlike Goddess, who comes right back to the outside, calls upon her class. Far Bridge is a neck in front. Far Bridge, it is Far Bridge to win the Grade 1 Joe Hurst Turf Classic. Warlike Goddess was a very resilient second. Then came Silver Knot.
Not the kind of performance you expect to see out of a Charlie Appleby, with Silver not looking good as gone at the top of the stretch, but just couldn't live it out in the 1.5-mile Joe Hurst Turf Classic. A lot of questions about that one moving forward, and whether or not you look at a horse who could get the 1.5 mile in the Breeders' Cup Turf there. But maybe Far Bridge is the U.S. horse we need to look at now, Jeff.
Well, I had kind of forgotten that he was a Grade 1 winner last year as a 3-year-old when he won the Belmont Derby. Yeah, I mean, he was one of several that were kind of taking turns at that time. And he started out this year at Gulfstream and then at Churchill, Saratoga. I mean, just kind of slopping around. He won the United Nations. I'm sorry, the Sword Dancer. That was good. And then he comes back and wins this race. Now, he won the Sword Dancer on the lead. So I always kind of, diminish the effort when you get loose in the lead going 1.5 miles and nobody goes with you. We've seen that before.
Right.
But he came off the pace this time over deep growing, and he ran down a couple of really top-class horses in Warlike Goddess who looked all over the winner after Silver Knot looked like all over a winner. And he ran both past them both impressively. And as a lightly raced colt by English Channel out of America by Silver Kitten, this is what he wants to do. Mm-hmm. And I would say for sure, especially based on what we saw out in California in the John Henry, that Far Bridge, no question, to me anyway, is the best marathon turf horse in the States right now based on his improving form. Now, what that does and how that matches up with the Euros will remain to be seen. But lightly raced, well-bred, he's in good hands. He's good. He's really good. Now, is he Rebels Romance good? I have to figure that one out. But right now, if you ask if he's the best older marathon turf horse in the States, he absolutely should be considered such.
Yeah, which horses will come from Europe, we're not sure. Rebels Romance, winner of the Breeders' Cup Turf a couple of years ago, is expected to be here. Auguste Rodin will not come to the U.S. In fact, he won't run in the Arc de Triomphe this weekend either. They contemplated that or waiting for the Japan Cup. They're going to go to Japan for defending Breeders' Cup Turf winner Auguste Rodin's final career start. So we will not see him back here in the States. One horse who will probably be in the Breeders' Cup Turf, Cabo Spirit. He's a local horse, George Papapadramu, winner of the John Henry Turf on the California Crown Day program. We'll give you a chance to see how he stole it on the front end, paying $51 mutual, and then we'll discuss whether he has any hope at all in the Breeders' Cup Turf.
They turn for home, and Cabo Spirit tries to sprint away from them with a 3-length lead. Masterpiece along the inside, Dicey Mochara in between, and outside of them, there goes Harvard, a 16th to go. Cabo Spirit is brave, 1.5 lengths with the wire coming, and Cabo Spirit pulls it off under Abel Cedillo. It's Cabo Spirit all the way.
Well, Jeff, you said you downgrade performances when they get away with an easy lead. You don't downgrade it if you cashed a ticket on that one for sure, but you're happy, you smile, and you don't chalk it up towards the next effort. Things are going to get a lot tougher for Cabo Spirit, I would have to think.
Well, I mean, he let 25, 50 and 2, 115, 139. He's loose in the lead with a bunch of older horses who never or can't really accelerate. And he rolled all the way, literally rolled all the way to the wire after going downhill the first part, I looked at his form. He'd never made the lead in his life, but he'd never had the inside draw going 1.25 miles with that dog leg coming up. So everybody kind of took back. Nobody respected him. He made the lead. He hadn't run badly when he was chasing. So if you give him a 2-length head start, you figured maybe he'll carry that speed. I thought he would carry his speed to the quarter pole and then he would give away, but he didn't give away because the late speed didn't materialize at all. I mean, there goes Harvard is basically a dirt horse. Master Pace, who was third, is just like he stays in the same spot all the time.
Right.
The late speed didn't show up at all, so he won. You know, he's not winning the Breeders' Cup Turf. I promise you that.
Right.
I don't know where he's going to finish, but he's not winning it.
Maybe the Breeders' Cup Turf winner will come out of the Arc de Triomphe. That in the Turf division is on Sunday in France. You'll be able to watch and wager on that with Express Bet and First Bet. Among the horses, the final declarations entries will be taken, stalls drawn on Thursday for the Arc. But among the leaders in there are the French Derby 1-3 finishers, Luc de Vega and Sosi. Sosi sent his comeback to win the Prix-Neil, a local prep for the Arc. So definitely two top contenders in there. From Japan, you got Shin Emperor for Yoshida Yohagi, maybe a horse who we could definitely see come stateside and be a major player. That horse was third in the Irish Champion last time, already leaving Japan in Shin Emperor. And then the Irish Derby winner, Los Angeles, for Aidan O'Brien. Aidan won't have City of Troy to go in the Turf division. He's going to go in the Classic. He won't have the defending champ, Auguste Rodin. He's headed, of course, to Japan, as we mentioned. So maybe Los Angeles will be the horse who shows up in Greater San Diego from the Aidan O'Brien barn. We'll see how he fares Sunday first up, though, in the Arc de Triomphe. Jeff, I know you're going to have some analysis of that race coming up over the weekend.
I am, and I'm be very paying close attention to the course and how it's playing, and whether it's wet. I mean, there's a possibility that it could be pretty soggy, but not. We'll see. And if I'll have that up probably Friday night sometime, with the caveat that I'm going to have. I got to hope that it's going to be good ground or better, but I don't know whether it will. But there's no world beaters in there. I mean, they're good horses. Don't get me wrong. Right. Whoever wins it is going to have to be really good to win. And there's 4 or 5 that are very closely matched in terms of form. So it'll be a good race to watch. Undercard's always good too. We see some good racing there. A lot of critical Group 1 races for the younger horses and the fillies and mares and the milers and things like that. So I'll be watching that Sunday morning. And again, I'll have what I hope will be a reasonably good analysis of the Arc for
winning analysis.
Winning analysis, yeah. I mean, it's an 18. I think they're looking at 18 possibilities in there. Tough course, tough race to handicap, but there are a number. That Japanese horse, by the way, did run very well in his last start. I wouldn't be surprised to see him run well as well. So looking forward to that.
Strong influence of 3-year-olds even in the Arc. And we talked about this across all the different divisions. When you look at it, where are the older horses in the world? I don't know. Ushpa Tesoro's sitting out there. I think he's 6 now. Just saying, who are these kids running around for the Breeders' Cup this year? Going to be a strong 3-year-old influence, not only in the Arc, but in the Breeders' Cup Classic and a lot of divisions across the big races around the world. Well, we're always looking for that next great 3-year-old. Typically, they start as great 2-year-olds, and our Stars of Tomorrow is where we wrap up each and every edition of the It's Official podcast. So our 5th topic this week is the Stars of Tomorrow, and we're going to take you to Churchill Downs. Second-time starter for Brad Cox back on the 28th of September in a Lowndes Company, stretching out to the mile and a 16th. Boy, did she look the part. Her name, Good Cheer.
16th. Adair is trying to hold second from La Marinera, but this is all Good Cheer, who's 10 lengths in front with 100 yards to go. Now it's more than that. Good Cheer, skipping over the slop, wins it by, we'll call it 15. Adair is second, Knight for third, La Marinera, or Hearts United.
So, Jeff, sometimes sloppy tracks will exaggerate a win margin. Sometimes a really good filly will be the responsible party for that margin. Probably the two collide in this one where the win margin goes off to, 17 lengths.
Yeah.
Even if you split the difference, if she wins that allowance by 8.5, you got yourself a star tomorrow.
Well, she's by Medalla d'Oro, and she's a 2-year-old filly, and she's winning her races by almost a 16th of a mile. Another Rachel, maybe? I don't know. But she does have the pedigree to be any kind of filly for Brad Cox. She is mentioned by Medalla d'Oro, who's always been a great filly sire. And they usually take a while to get, to find themselves. I mean, Rachel wasn't Rachel until later on in her career, whereas this filly is just a 2-year-old. Out of her name, Wedding Toast. You remember her, Jeremy? She won the Ogden Phipps, the Beldame, Ruffian. I mean, she was a top class mare. She's a relatively young mare too. So I don't know if couldn't find anything that she's had yet, but being by Medaille d'Or on out of Wedding Toast, I mean, the sky's the limit for her. I don't know whether they're going to rush her into the Breeders' Cup. My gut feeling is that they won't. I mean, because she's going to, I mean, as good as she is now, imagine what she's going to be next spring, you know?
Right.
So, but demolishing her fight. Now, she won her debut at Horseshoe, Indiana, and she won that race by, I don't know, 8 or 9 points, whatever it was. So we don't know how good she is, but last 8th and 6 and 2, we know she wasn't actually getting tired in this race. So, yeah, I mean, Brad's got to be over the moon with her potential, and we'll keep watching her as she develops and matures, and who knows how good she can really be. But she's right now a star in the making.
And don't ever just dismiss the Brad Cox horses that debut at Horseshoe Indy, because it's one of my handicapping angles that I've discovered at Keeneland over the years. Is his horses that go to Indy get kind of overlooked. People think they're the second tier ones, but often they're the ones that want a little more distance as 2-year-olds. And so Brad will send them there, and then they end up showing up at Keeneland or Churchill in the fall meet, and they're actually stacked. They're good runners, and they're not the B squad that he sent off somewhere else. Like sometimes if Pletcher debuts one at Monmouth and not Saratoga, it's pretty obvious that they're with the B string. That's not the case when Brad Cox debuts. He's had a lot of good ones debut at Horseshoe Indianapolis who turned out to be a top-notch runners. That's going to wrap up our 5 topics. Let's review them for you this week. Our Breeders' Cup Classic Fallout. We took you to Subsanador's win in the California Crown, the Woodward Stakes, where Skippy Longstocking succumbed at the end to Tapit Trice. We talked about the retirement of Dornoch and the Breeders' Cup Classic, who might be getting some more Japanese influence come about 24 hours from now when Forever Young runs in the Japan Dirt Classic. How good is Johannes? Jeff Siegel says maybe Breeders' Cup Mile winner good. We'll see how the winner of the City of Hope Mile comes back and performs in the Breeders' Cup in about 4 weeks' time over a Delmar course we already know he likes. She stated her case, and it was a good one. Yes, the filly and mare sprint looked like Sweet Azteca's division, but now Ways and Means has something to say about it. So we'll see how that Chad Brown trainee tries to be the follow-up to Goodnight Olive for the barn. The U.S. Turf Division got its hand raised by a leading contender finally, where Far Bridge won the Joe Hurst Turf Classic, running down the 2-time defending champ Warlike Goddess with an inside rally. Far Bridge right now 20-1 on odds checker for the Breeders' Cup Turf, maybe the best of the U.S. hopefuls. And our star of tomorrow, we just saw her, Good Cheer, a runaway 17-length winner at Churchill Downs over the weekend. Those 5 topics are now official because Jeff Siegel and I said so. That's the way we play the game. And we'll re-rack it and do it with 5 more topics a week from now next Tuesday when we get to recap opening weekend at Keeneland, a second battery of preps towards the Breeders' Cup on the West Coast at Santa Anita and on the East Coast at Belmont at Aqueduct. We'll be able to recap the Arc de Triomphe. We'll know how Forever Young ran in his race in Japan. So much going on over the next week. Jeff can't wait till next week to do it again.
Yeah, I mean, this opening weekend at Keeneland is just so much fun in the fall, and I know you'll be handicapping that and analyzing that. So good racing. Hope for some good weather there, so we can get form that we can count on. And we still have a couple of nice races out here at Santa Anita that will have Breeders' Cup implications for the 2-year-olds and the grass horses. So looking forward to a great weekend of racing. And of course, over in France, we're watching those races very carefully. And lots still to learn. We're getting close, but a lot of good racing that will have an impact when we see them again next month at Del Mar.
Jeff and I will be back on Friday for the First Call podcast, where we'll handicap some of these weekend races in more detail for you. Have a great week, everybody.